Can Sri Lanka's new Marxist president turn the island nation's fortunes around? Anura Kumara Dissanayake has a daunting task ahead of him. He's managed to overturn decades of dynastic rule, but can he live up to the expectations of a population desperate for change? I'm Mariam Zaidi, and today's Newsmaker is Sri Lanka. A presidential victory that hasn't come as a huge shock, but it's created something close to a political earthquake. Since independence, Sri Lanka has been ruled by two political dynasties. It's been quite the turnaround. In the last election, Dissanayake's left-wing coalition garnered just 3% of the vote. But 2 years later, after economic chaos and mass protests that toppled former President Rajapaksa, Dissanayake won with 42% of the vote, promising change. How will he now navigate the country out of poverty and, as he says, give Sri Lanka a fresh start? Let's take a look.
Sri Lanka's leftist leader Anura Kumara Dissanayake sworn in as president on September 22nd, after two of the most turbulent years Sri Lanka has experienced in decades. Economic mismanagement exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic plunged the country into 70% inflation, power tariffs rose 65%, and the currency depreciated by 45%. The collapse of the tourism industry, Sri Lanka's main source of foreign income, only deepened the crisis. These conditions sparked mass protests, eventually forcing then-President Gotabaya Rajapaksa into exile. In the wake of this political upheaval, Dissanayake emerged as a key figure, taking on the leadership role with a promise to rebuild the nation.
There was a need for a government with a mandate from the people if you want to rescue the country from the crisis. We know in the recent past, the mandate was distorted. The distortion of the people's mandate affected the parliament and other institutions beyond that. The people's mandate that is needed to take this country forward is being established. That was the main point of the presidential election.
In July 2022, Ranil Wickremesinghe became acting president amidst the political crisis and was subsequently elected as president by parliament to stabilize the country. Under his leadership, the economy saw some recovery thanks in part to a $2.9 billion IMF loan. Inflation has eased slightly, but the country's debt crisis remains a significant challenge.
Economic crisis and what led to the people's movement are key indicators that people wanted a change. And that message was very much articulated in 2022 in wanting to see a change in political culture which kind of saw high corruption and nepotism. And that seems to have been captured in the messages and the manifestos that we saw in the NPP and the Anura Kumara Dissanayake campaign slogans.
Now, Dissanayake emerges as the new face of Sri Lankan politics, promising to reshape the economy. However, his past is marked by a controversial chapter. In the late 1980s, Dissanayake led an armed insurrection that resulted in tens of thousands of deaths, a period now referred to as the Season of Terror. Though he has since apologized for the violence, his party, JVP, still adheres to Marxist principles. Dissanayake's vision for Sri Lanka involves transforming it into a production-led economy, prioritizing manufacturing, technology, and agricultural self-sufficiency while downplaying the traditional focus on tourism.
The cost of living has always been high. We have no way of living. What you earn is not enough. It's in a situation like this that we voted for Comrade Anura Kumara. What we expect from Anura Kumara is to develop the country from now onwards.
Dissanayake has also promised to raise the tax threshold and increase spending on essential services like education and healthcare. But he faces a delicate balancing act. Sri Lanka's IMF loan requires strict fiscal discipline. Now, as Sri Lanka looks toward the future, all eyes are on Dissanayake. Can he lead the country out of crisis and into a new era of growth, or will the weight of the past challenges hold him back?
So joining me to debate that and so much more are from Colombo, lecturer in economics at the University of Colombo, we have Umesh Moramudali. Also from the Sri Lankan capital, former advisor to President Ranil Wickremesinghe, we have Aruna Kulatunga. And joining us from Boston, but also normally resident in Colombo, we have founder and president of the United Centenary Front Party, Prashan De Visser. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the programme. Now, Umesh, I'm going to come to you first as our sort of resident economist. Sri Lankans have overwhelmingly voted for something new. This is a power shift from the right to the left, elite to working class. Dissanayake says he's no magician, and you say Sri Lanka needs a pragmatist president. Is he that?
Well, I mean, it's too early to say. But as of now, what he had done, to me, is pragmatic, particularly from the economic perspective. Couple of things. One is that he had kept the secretary to the treasury without changing him, also the secretary to the foreign ministry. And also he had not intervened in taking out the central bank governors, which I think are very crucial in terms of the economic stability, because central bank governor as well as the secretary of the treasury were key individuals that ensured the economic stability, and that also had translated into positive signals to the market so far. So we can see that the stock market responding well, forex market responding well, and we also see the rating agencies also acknowledging that the president has thus far been pragmatic. So I think for overall sense, it's too early to say, but thus far what I can see is that he hadn't really tried to mess up things or to be ideological driven. So far, I believe that he understands the gravity of the economic crisis that we are still in. We are still not out of the woods yet.
Okay, so you're giving him the benefit of the doubt for now. Now, Aruna, your man, the former president Wickremesinghe, he became unpopular, not just for enacting punishing austerity, but also for unlawful conduct and suppressing local elections. But under him, Sri Lanka's economy grew by 5%, the currency stabilised, inflation fell to single digits. He also secured the terms for the $2.9 billion IMF loan. So, I mean, you know, do you think that Dissanayake can actually build on this and take Sri Lanka forward? You know, can he be rational and sensible, especially, you know, when he comes from a past where he led a violent insurgency?
Okay, so let me just first start off by saying my days of advising Mr. Wickremesinghe are way past, way back in 2000. Having said that, what I see right now is that Mr. Dissanayake actually didn't get the mandate of the people. In Sri Lanka, what has happened usually is it's a two-horse race. This time it became a three-horse race. So Mr. Dissanayake got almost 41% or 42% of that vote. 60% was divided between Mr. Sajid Premadasa and former President Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. So he didn't get the full mandate. But having said that, increasing his 3% to 40% is very commendable, and that shows the dissatisfaction amongst, I would say, mainly the younger generation. People who were born after 1990s, the Gen Z as they call it, they were extremely dissatisfied with what was happening in the country. Mainly the corruption that was taking place for some time, the cost of living, even though we have got single digit, actually it's almost 0.5% inflation, very, very low inflation. We also have issues in terms of high taxation. Again, it's limited to the top, really the top people, about less than 10% of the population. But still, there's a trickle-down effect on that as well. Now, directly to your question, Mr. Dissanayake was never led a violent uprising. He represents a party which is also part of a larger coalition. So he came to power as president through a larger coalition known as the NPP, but he represents a party called the JVP, which has a very violent history, but he was not part of that history. So I'm also like Umesh, giving him the benefit of the doubt and seeing how he can perform in the next 6 months. I believe he can probably turn things around if everybody gets together and gives him that help that is necessary.
Okay, so you can potentially turn things around. And what you were saying leads nicely now to Prashan, because you also brought up the younger person vote. So Prashan, can a person change, even given the past or the past of his party, you could say? You, of course, have called it one of the greatest comebacks in the political history. But is it protest or change that people have really voted for, especially when it comes to young people? And beyond the politics, can he also unite all ethnicities, including, for example, Tamils, unlike the former President Wickremesinghe?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And in the first few days, President Dissanayake has shown a commitment, and even through his campaign, that he is taking the ethnic issues seriously. He's trying to make sure that he wins the hearts of not just the Sinhalese, but the Tamils and the Muslims as well. Immediately after swearing in, you saw him at the Buddhist temples, but also you saw him engaging with the Catholic community, the Muslim community, and the Hindu community as well. His campaign intentionally campaigned in regions where they haven't tried before, because they never thought they could reach the ethnic minority vote. But they've tried, and they've done pretty well for maybe their first time really campaigning nationwide. So there are some signs of a desire to unite the country. And I feel some of these elements are what really inspired the younger vote. I think millennials and Gen Zs are about 52% of the voting public. And many of them overwhelmingly voted towards Dissanayake, mainly because of a desire to see the end of corruption, because he made some very grand promises of how corruption will end, how there will be fairness in government, there will be transparency in government. And I think the younger generation were willing to give him a chance. So the early stages so far, the steps that he's taken have been impressive, and we hope he'll continue in this and be held accountable by not just the younger generation, but the entire voting public. Because as was said, he only received 42% of the votes. That's obviously one of the lowest amounts received. And so now he has to win the hearts of the 60% who rejected him. And so these few weeks and months are going to be crucial in that journey.
Okay, so crucial few months for him. Now, Aruna, you've said previously that this is a man who is untested. His immediate challenge, though, will be to secure a parliamentary majority in, of course, the upcoming snap elections, if his administration is, of course, to govern effectively. Just how much of this is an unusual situation for Sri Lanka to be in, that a president only has 3 sort of active MPs in the last parliament?
That really wouldn't matter, because as of now, the parliament stands dissolved. So it's the interim cabinet. So with the interim cabinet, until the parliament is reconvened after the general election, he can continue. So the number of MPs in his currently has no impact at all. However, having said that, what we see and what we will continue to see is the 2 centre-right parties, that is the party under Mr. Sajid Premadasa, and the party that is again a front of different parties under Mr. Wickremesinghe, will try their hardest to defeat Mr. Dissanayake at the parliamentary elections. And if to defeat Mr. Dissanayake, however, they will have to come together and work together. So that's going to be a tricky situation, because if they come as individual 2 different parties, they will lose, because we have something called a bonus seat situation, where there is bonus seats for 25 bonus seats that goes to the winner per electorate, so per electorate district. So that will probably go to NPP, and they will get majority in the parliament unless these 2 parties come together. And that I'm not actually seeing at the moment. So I think at the end, Mr. Dissanayake and his party will actually have a majority in the parliament as well.
Okay,
so it's a tricky situation.
Well, Umesh, while we do, of course, await the composition of this new parliament, let's also discuss the big tests that lie ahead. And, of course, the biggest test is building a stable economy. How can he also keep the promises that he has made to Sri Lanka's working classes, so lowering taxes and bills, whilst also keeping up with the IMF and all of Sri Lanka's debtors on his side? I mean, you know, has he been showing commitment to the IMF programme in what he said so far?
Well, I think, I mean, I'll address this question from two parts. One, in terms of the IMF. Dissanayake very categorically stated that they will not derail from the IMF program throughout his campaign. This is not something that you would expect them to say a few years back. So that for me, that shows that they have sort of deviated from the very hard left or the extremist ideas and to a workable solution. To put it in his words, he said, all ongoing options, all the future options would be within the IMF basket. So I think they're committed to the IMF program and they would probably make some slight changes. But I believe that none of the changes will happen before the parliament election. Whatever will happen after the parliament election, because doing any changes before parliament election would not give a good signal to the market, and that would show signs of hurry of changing on the program or whatnot, and that wouldn't sit well in terms of the economy or with the creditors or with the IMF. So I think they would be cautious with that. So whatever change will come after the IMF program, and I think they will really stick to the targets that has been specified without deviating from those targets much, including the tax targets and the primary surplus targets, so on and so forth. What we will see though is in achieving those targets, they will go for different pathways in achieving those targets, particularly in terms of achieving the tax revenue. So in that front, they would aim at giving certain tax relief, particularly to the middle class, because the premise is actually the income tax. They have promised to increase the income tax threshold from 1 lakh to 2 lakh monthly, which is aiming at satisfying the middle class. I think they also estimated the certain revenue loss, which in my opinion, not the wisest decision in the long term, but I believe that these revenue losses would not significantly affect the primary surplus, and in the shorter term, you could implement various measures to increase the tax net, but I don't think that there would be significant deviation from the IMF. In terms of other relief to the poor, I think those also could be provided within the IMF program targets, because we have done pretty well, particularly under Mr. Wickremesinghe's administration in collecting taxes. We increased the tax rates and also implement different measures that had actually increased Sri Lanka's tax revenue. Also, we had sort of curtailed the capital expenditure in this year particular, and that also helped gaining actually a primary surplus up to this point. So there are monies that can be spent not in large amounts, but to give a certain targeted relief to the poor more than that was provided in the past. And in fact, certain promises were made by Mr. Wickremesinghe as well, including salary increments and certain tax changes within the IMF program framework. So I think those will be feasible as long as there won't be significant increase. For example, if they don't try to change the VAT significantly, or if they don't try to change the company income taxes significantly, or to reduce the current 36% tax rate to 24%. If they don't do such changes, they would be fine with minor changes. So there's room for minor changes, but the key is to stick with the targets and to go there using different directions while providing some more relief. I think what people more expect from them in the shorter term is the transparency and accountability and some proper action in terms of eliminating corruption. So because
and Aruna, you also
people
wanted
really
to,
feel that
Aruna, I can see you raise your hand as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on his ambition to stabilise the economy?
Yeah, I have actually a question for Umesh, because he's the expert on this side. Even if you raise the threshold from 100,000 to 200,000, that will really have a minimum impact on the taxation, isn't it? Because the amount already we pay about 3,000 rupees. So it's a very minimum impact on taxation. So I don't think it really matters,
Correct.
But psychologically it will matter.
Correct. No, I mean, the point is, I mean, they themselves have estimated that this revenue loss would be around 60 billion per year. That's not a significant amount. But the problem in long term is you're taking out a lot of people out of the tax net. and indirectly that is bad in terms of the tax collection. So theoretically speaking, that's not really good for a country that try to build a tax base. So it's not the mere revenue loss for the year; it's for the longer term what you're going to do. So if you sort of compensate this increase of threshold by other means to get these people into tax net, then you're fine. So that's not going to have a direct revenue impact for sure. For the shorter term, that's not the problem. Problem is like you're sustaining a higher tax base. But as I said, it's not. So most of the proposals they have been very cautious not to. They've been very cautious.
Okay, well, Prashan, let's just bring you in then. I mean, we've been talking about the finances and Sri Lanka's sovereign debt, but we need to get the economy moving. Now, Dissanayake's long-term vision is really to transform Sri Lanka into a production-based economy, focusing on sectors like manufacturing, agriculture, and information technology. Are those the kind of jobs that young people want to actually go into? And does Sri Lanka have the infrastructure to implement those changes?
Once again, that's where some of the bold and ambitious goals are going to be tested. On one end, they have to continue to balance the economy and work with the IMF and so on. On the other end, they're trying to reduce the burden on the common citizen. And at the same time, they're trying to push for an industrialized economy with limited infrastructure right now. And one of the challenges many of their critiques had said was, do they have the experience, the executive leadership capacity to really deliver on that? So they have to balance on three fronts. Will they be able to do this is the question. So it'd be interesting, first of all, will they get a majority in parliament? And then the caliber of people that they will bring in who have the capacity to lead, who have the capacity to actually govern in that level. Because when you take the JVP's base, when their leadership is pretty much career politicians who've been politicians from the time they graduated university. And so you're asking the question, will they have? But if they do bring in people of high competence into the system and they try to create some meaningful pragmatic change as they have done so far, and not becoming slaves to their former failed ideologies, then there is a chance for hope. So it's once again, it's a wait and see game. For Sri Lanka's sake, we wish them well and we hope they'll make the right decisions. One of the traps for the JVP and the MPP right now is a lot of Gotabaya Rajapaksa's voters almost entirely, or maybe at least 80%, turned their way. And many of those supporters now might try to have parliamentarians that are more leaning towards an SLPP background coming through the MPP. Now, that party is the party that's accused of a lot of corruption, a lot of divisiveness. And if the MPP compromises and lets SLPP fractions come in through the ranks, even the lower ranks, into parliament, then they might find themselves in a lot of trouble as well, because they would have lost competence from more corruption. So those are the things that we have to monitor and hold them accountable. And Dissanayake's government said, hold him accountable to a higher standard than the status quo. And that's exactly what we should be doing.
Aruna, is China part of the approach that the new president should be taking? I mean, where are Sri Lanka's traditional allies? And as Dissanayake tries to reinvent Sri Lanka's flagging economy, which countries could also be important allies?
That question really should go to Umesh, because he's written quite a lot about this China and India and the kind of the trilogy that is there. But having said that, JVP traditionally has been very much antithesis of India. However, we are not talking of JVP now, we're talking of NPP. So the current Prime Minister, for example, has never taken an anti-Indian stance that I know of. There is another young, the elite Colombo, how should I say, members of the NPP, like Rai Kelly Baltasar, then also the current Prime Minister, Harini, they all have never been anti-India. And they have been anti-China at some stages in their lives. So the problem is that JVP is traditionally been a friend of China. And I believe China is very much in touch with Mr. Dissanayake at the moment. And so has been India. In fact, Mr. Dissanayake had very extensive tour of India just about 2 months ago, where he was very warmly received, and a lot of the rhetoric that he was talking about just before he left to India was toned down very much after he came back. So I think it's going to be interesting in terms of the geopolitics that is involved. We will continue to be in the middle of India and China. Not a very comfortable position for us, but that is where we are, and we have to learn to live with it and continue to make use of all of the resources that are around us, our friends who are around us, and make the best of it. So I think Sanaka is doing that at the moment.
Indeed. Well, let's hope that there can be an effective government, of course, after the honeymoon period is over. Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for watching, and don't forget that you can always follow us on X, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Mariam Zaidi. See you next time.